Hi, I'm Corey Baldwin.
And I'm Dan Searle, and it's time for a whole new season of Off the Beaten Path Hoops podcast for basketball coaches who are living in obscurity, working in obscurity, and those who have even made it out of obscurity.
And we have that today, I believe, but it's a place for storytelling, learning, connecting, reconnecting, name dropping here and there. We also have food for thought, and my favorite part, food for the belly.
All right, well, let's get started with this new guest, Brian James, coming to us with 49 years of coaching experience, the high school, the college, the pro, big names, the little names, everything in between. Welcome to the podcast, Coach James.
Yeah, it all started when I was 14, and I just idolized my coaches. Everyone, I gravitated to everything they said, did, mannerisms, so forth. We had a lot of great coaches at Taylorville High School in the day, not only just in basketball, but other sports as well. And I knew, obviously, the first option for every child is to play. And I wanted to play as long as I could. I was fortunate enough to play baseball in college and help with the basketball program at Illinois State. But I knew that if I wasn't going to be good enough to play, what's the next best thing? And it was obvious to me I wanted to be a high school basketball coach. And I thought that's what my entire career would be as a high school basketball coach. And that's what I went to Illinois State with. I was a education majored in physical education, minored in driver ed, and coached about every sport under the sun that you could think of at the high school level. And I did it at 4 different schools for 18 years. And I thought that it would be till the day I retire, but my path changed, and we'll talk about that. But 4 different schools. I spent 7 of those years back in my hometown of Taylorville, and it was really interesting. My first job, we talked about Dan, about who you know and what you know, maybe sometimes creates an opportunity for you. And after I graduated from college, I was really nervous about getting a job, and because it was about mid-July, and schools start late August, right around Labor Day. And my baseball coach at Illinois State was a guy by the name of Duffy Bass, who was a great college baseball coach. The field's named after him at Illinois State. His wife went to Wilmington High School, and it just so happened that one day the principal at Wilmington High School called Duffy Bass and said, "We're still looking for a basketball coach and an assistant baseball coach and an assistant football coach. Do you have anybody that could come in and coach all 3 sports?"
Why, yes.
And he goes, "You know what? I think I got the guy for you." And sure enough, I went up and talked to him, and I had my first ever job at Wilmington High School. And Corey, you can relate to this story. My first day basically on the job was the weekend before school started, and my freshman coach walked in and met with the AD and he said, "Look, I love it here, but I've got an opportunity to make more money in private business, so I'm going to resign from my teaching job or coaching job and not coach anymore." And so the principal and the AD and I came up with a plan that they freed me up the last period of the day. I coached the freshman boys during that 8th grade PE class. And then it was only about a 45-minute to an hour practice. And then my varsity guys came out. So I coached both the freshmen and the varsity my first year, plus Fresh South football. Fortunate enough that I had a great head coach there. I said, "I don't know one thing about football." He goes, "Just yell at them a lot and put them through calisthenics, and the sophomore coach will handle the rest." Well, we went undefeated because we had great talent. Okay. Um, and then I coached, our Fresh South baseball team. And that only lasted 1 year because I got the opportunity to go back to my hometown, which I dearly loved, and stayed there for 7 years. And that's where I became friends with the Hicksonball family. And, David Hicksonball, Matt's dad, was such an instrumental part in the school system there.
I know I played other sports as a kid growing
Yeah.
up, and
Yeah.
then I used a lot of. I was a high school quarterback, so option quarterback. So a lot of that goes into my coaching now.
Yeah.
How was it coaching other sports? Like, did you
I
take
loved
some
it. I
stuff?
loved it. First of all, I was probably a better baseball player than I was basketball player.
Mhm.
It just so happened, Corey, that I gravitated towards basketball because we had the teams that I coached, we had great players, and my
Mhm.
records were a little bit better. And it just kind of gravitated that when the job became open at another school, it was the basketball job, not the baseball job. But I was the head coach at my last two schools in both sports. And then,
Really?
I've
Awesome.
I've coached women's tennis. I've coached, obviously, we talked about football. I've coached track. So there's a number of sports, but obviously basketball was my primary coaching background. But I still use, like you said, little things that you've learned in dealing with those sports and those people that I
Mhm.
still use today. And I still use some of the same out of bounds plays, quick hitters that I ran in high school 35, 40 years ago. So, here it is.
I
And they
love it.
still work, huh?
They still work.
Nice. And having players always counts and helps a little bit.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to Taylorville, and you talk about hometown and coaching there, and Hicksonball family, among others. What does basketball mean to that town? And you talk of Johnny Orr, right? You've got
Yeah. Yeah.
legends who have come out of Taylorville in
Well, they were
basketball.
the first ever undefeated team in the state of Illinois. They finished in 1944. They finished 45-0. Now, what school now plays 45 games? So, they were probably playing every third day. Um,
Junior colleges, right, Corey?
Yeah, yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Similar.
Yeah,
Both
but
scratch.
Johnny Orr was a grade school, middle school, high school classmate of my mother. So and so I don't. That's one of the reasons why I idolized my coaches, because of the history and the culture that was built in that day in Taylorville High School, and also it's one of the best and most prestigious old time gyms in the state of Illinois, or if not the country. And it's an incredible venue. Um, their program is not what it used to be, but for a period of those teams in the 40s and 50s, and then we got it back when I was there in the late 70s or early 80s. We had some really quality teams as well and made it to this sectional final. I'll tell you one thing about Johnny Orr and our Taylorville teams. Um, when I was the coaching in Taylorville, we won our regional and we had to play East St. Louis Lincoln in the first game of the sectional in East St. Louis. LaFonso Ellis, great NBA player, was on their team among many, Quanzo Martin, among many other high Division One players. And by the time Johnny Orr from Iowa State got to the game, the only seat available was the one directly behind me. Basically, his knees were in my back. So he puts his arms around during the layup line. He puts his arms around myself and Lee Emery, who I coached with. And he said, "Boys, you might as well sit back and relax because this game is over." And
Thanks, coach.
and sure enough, he says, "I've offered every one of those guys a scholarship to Iowa State, and we lost by 30. It was 70-40."
How about that? And before the coaching at Taylorville, you mentioned Illinois State.
Yeah.
Let's go there as you played baseball and got your PE
Well,
and
yeah,
driver's ed, but also
again, and here's how that happened. I guess I started this transfer portal or whatever. I loved Taylorville High School so much, but I did not graduate from Taylorville. My parents were divorced, and my mom got remarried the summer before my senior year. So I went to a small town school called Pleasant Plains, Illinois, which is about 30 miles 18 miles to be specific, on the other side of Springfield. So it was about an hour from Taylorville. So, I did again every sport. I ran cross country because the high school basketball coach was a cross country coach and did basketball. But the good thing about me that I had an experience there was they had fall baseball and spring baseball. So I got to really play about 100 baseball games in a calendar year. Um, and Duffy Bass from Illinois State was recruiting a pitcher from another school, Chatham Glenwood, and he came to watch him play, and we just happened to be the opponent. And we only got 3 hits in that game. We lost the game 3-2, and I got all 3 hits for our team. So 2 days later, I get this phone call at our farm where I lived, and he said, "What are your plans next year?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to go to one of the state schools, and I don't know which one yet." He goes, "Well, if you come to Illinois State, I'd love to be able to offer you a preferred walk-on position. I'm not going to give you scholarship money right off the get. You'll have to earn that." And after 2 years, I did. That's how I got found, because they were recruiting another guy at another school.
Hey, and you performed, you got the hits,
Yeah,
right?
but then my first love was all my or tied for my first love was always basketball. So I immediately walked in. Will Robinson, who was the first ever Division I black head coach, and I became quick friends. And they had Gene Smithson and Ron Ferguson, great Illinois high school basketball coaches who were assistants at that time. And I saw, as soon as my duties as a baseball player ended, I helped whatever I could do with the basketball program.
So tell us how was the next high school that you went to? So
Well, I left Taylorville after 7 years, went to Romeoville High School, and I inherited a team that was probably the best, most talented high school team I've ever had from top to bottom. And we had a player by the name of Sean Vandiver, who later at University of Colorado led the Big Eight at that time. Now it's the Big whatever it is, 12. But now there's 1,000 schools in each
yeah,
conference.
yeah, exactly.
I'm Big Eight. He led in both rebounding and scoring 2 consecutive years. So we had Sean Vandiver among others, and we finished fourth place in the state of Illinois. So it was kind of apropos, when I left Taylorville, that we started personally, I started a series of runs that get to never did win a state championship, but we got to the Final Four one time and got the Elite Eight 3 times. And so, it became a nice run for me. I only stayed there 4 years because due to cutbacks in full-time positions and so forth, they would always what they call a pink slip, not or a blue slip, or it was called where they could not put you on tenure, but they would recall you back like 3 weeks before school started, so you would never be on tenure. And I told them our basketball program had really taken off. I said, if 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 you don't put me on full-time tenure, I'm going to look for another job. And at that time, Chris Collins was a freshman at Glenbrook North, starting on the varsity, and his dad Doug and I were very close friends. Doug's like my older brother. Chris is like my younger brother now. But he says, "Come up and watch Chris play, would you?" And I said, the only game that I could come to would be the last regular season game of the season, because I'm getting ready with my own team to play in a regional. So, I finished the year at Romeoville, went up the last Saturday, watched Glenbrook North play, and uh, Chris was playing on the sophomore game that night, because it was obviously senior night, and so I only got to see him play a half. So I decided to stay for the varsity game, and I thought they were the worst team that I had seen that year. And I said, I'm going to get this team on the schedule. All right. I thought they were well coached. I thought they were disciplined. They ran good stuff. They just didn't have much talent. And lo and behold, 3 weeks later, I'm their basketball coach. Okay, because the AD called me up and said, "I don't know who you are, but I want to talk to you." And they had, obviously they cut ties with the basketball coach at that time. I went up there. They had 7 gymnasiums every level practices after school, boys and women. They had their own facility. And Chris Collins was going to be a sophomore. And they had not won a conference in 12 years and had been 500 in 9 years. So it was a slow, gradual process. 12 and 14 our first year, then 20 and 6, 27 and 3. Chris leaves, and those guys learned from Chris, his teammates, how fun it was to win. And
Hmm.
we were getting uh, kids who lived in our gym, and we went from 27 and 3 to 28 and 3, 23 and 5, and then 29 and 2 my last year there. And so both Romeoville and Glenbrook North, the talent level was very, very good. 4 years at Romeoville, 6 years at Glenbrook North, and again, coached both the head baseball. I was head baseball and head basketball at both schools. So, I felt bad for my assistant baseball coach because I walk in 3 days before the first game when he's done all the preseason work, take over. So, but anyway, it was a great time. I would never had left Glenbrook North. I'd still be there today had not Doug Collins not. We were running his Chicago Bulls basketball camps, and he called me outside about 2 months after he had been fired, and tears started coming down his face. And he goes, I've been fired from my dream job. And he goes, I don't know if I'm going to ever coach again, but if I ever do, you're coming with me full time. And because he knew how loyal I had been to him, how hardworking I would be, you know, he thought I was a great basketball coach, which that helps as well. And the clock never stops. As a basketball coach, you're always working 24 hours a day. So, you know, and I said, well, okay, we'll see what happens. And every year I would tell him, I said, he was a TNT announcer, number one announcer in the country. And I said, well, out of sight, out of mind. If you don't take a job this year, you're never going to get one. Just wait. He said, just wait, just wait. And every year he got offered better jobs than he did the year before. And 6 years after he got fired from the Bulls, you saw the Last Dance sequence when he was in
Hmm.
that. He became the president and the uh, GM, president and head basketball coach of the Detroit Pistons. And he called me over to his house one night. We lived about 2 miles apart. And he said, give BJ some swim trunks. We're going out in the hot tub at 10 o'clock at night on a school night. I go, what the heck? So anyway, we were out there till 1 a.m., 3 hours in the hot tub. And he says, you need to go home and talk to your family because I'm going to take this job and you need to decide whether I'm offering you a full-time position. And I want to see if you and your family want to move to Detroit. And I thought, man, I got such a great job now, but if I don't do this, I'll always wonder what if. And
Right.
so, sure enough, I went from coaching high school kids to Grant Hill in just a few days period. And Grant Hill and Joe Dumars, two Hall of Famers, right off the get go. And we were very, very good in Detroit, and that led to an 18-year run with 5 different teams.
That's crazy. Before we talk about going from a high school kid to Grant Hill and Joe Dumars, take it back a couple steps. That you talk about Doug Collins being your big brother. Where
Yeah.
did that connection and relationship
Well,
come from?
what happened, and I credit Bob Sullivan a lot. Bob Sullivan was a longtime high school coach, Hall of Fame coach, and he ran the Bulls summer camps for many, many years. When Jerry Sloan coached, Dick Motta coached, and he helped organize all those camps. And so I started working the camps, and Doug Collins, my first year at Romeoville, I never talked to Doug one time. He was a Bulls coach. He was a rookie coach in Chicago. I didn't bother him. And I show up working his basketball camp. He goes, where have you been? And I said, I did not want to bother you. And from that point on, for 3 weeks, we were basically inseparable at his all night basketball camp. And And then, that happened for 10, basically we did that camp for like 10, 12 straight years. And that's where our friendship just truly blossomed. And then, 3 years later, I was coaching, obviously, in the same town that he lived in and coached his son. So I'll tell you one thing about Corey, you always wonder about coaching famous people's son. And he talked to me one day and he goes, look, he goes, this is what I want you to do with Chris. He goes, I want you to play him in any position you feel that he should play. I don't care if it's point guard or center. I want you to play his ass off, and I want you to win as many games as you can. You'll never hear a word from me. And that is so true. That is exactly what happened. He was our point guard, but yet he goes, teach him how to play and teach him how to be a player. And fortunately for my sake, he was Mr. Basketball of Illinois, led the state of Illinois in scoring his last 2 seasons, and won a scholarship to Duke. So I was pretty well set in the Collins family after that, and a McDonald's All-American. So so then, Chris and I stayed very, very close from that point on. And Doug and then I coached with Doug 3 different times in the NBA. Every other job was back with Doug. So,
We got a lot of coaches watching and listening on the podcast, and we know the stories. I've worked Duke basketball camp and
yeah.
played pickup with Chris Collins, but your college camps have a certain aura to them. Had no idea the NBA camps back in the day had that kind of feel and all night hanging out and
Yeah.
we're doing
Well,
this
we
together.
we
What
had
was
our
that like?
basketball camp in River Forest, Illinois, at Concordia College, and Keith Peterson was the coach at Concordia. So they opened us with open arms. It was at that time they also paid the most to the high school coaches. So we got head varsity basketball coaches would take a week or 2 weeks out of their summer and work this camp, and it was so good during the day. We made every drill competitive. We played a lot of 3-on-3, what they call cutthroat and pick up, and then we played games, and then we do, teach, the normal stations one time in the morning. But we made it fun for the kids and very competitive. And then the coaches stayed in the dorms, so you get to hear the same jokes year after year, day, every year, and you still laugh the same jokes every day, every year, and you
Even
still
gets
laugh,
funnier.
and you become close for, and you become a family.
Yeah.
And that's how Doug and I mean, we spent every minute for 3 weeks straight every summer together. And then, we ate together as a pro staff. We ate together almost every night, and we were in cities where, my family may be with me, may not be with me. And so, you become very close with somebody during that time.
Well, being I'm sure you were a basketball junkie since you coached basketball.
Yeah.
When you get to the Pistons, I mean, I'm just going through the years you were there. I mean, we could do a whole segment on. I mean, there are some unbelievable names that played there.
Well, yeah,
You're talking about some college legends. Childress, Montross, Lakener, Stackhouse.
yeah,
I mean,
I was blessed, coached with or coached 7 Hall of Famers in my career. But the teams in Detroit, I'll tell you one thing about Doug Collins. He was incredible at turning a franchise around immediately. The
mm,
culture, what players you needed to maybe move to another organization, what players that he loved that he wanted to bring in, and he did not care what your last name was. I mean, we picked up guys from Europe, Michael Curry, who we gave a 2-year contract to, and cut a guy cut a famous player that had like 12 million left on his contract, and we cut him.
mm,
So, uh, but we inherited a program that had only won 27 games the year before, and we won 46 our first year. Allen Houston leaves for the first ever free agency. He promised us he was staying, but he signed with the Knicks on the first day of free agency. So we lost Allen Houston. Our play and the media just went wild. The Pistons are done, and our players are so mad and so together that we went from 46 to 54, had the best record in the East at the halfway point, coached in the NBA All-Star game, which is another
Unbelievable.
Another thrill. And then we lost in the first round of the playoffs that year to the Atlanta Hawks. Steve Smith, Mutombo, Leitner. We lost in game five when Mutombo blocked three of Grant Hill's shots in the last minute. But it was a great series. And you know, going back to that All-Star experience with those teams with Detroit, those players made us have the best record in the East. And 2 years, or I'm looking up in the second quarter, and I'm on my knee during a timeout. And I'm staring at Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, the the greatest players in the world in my mind, and I grew up just idolizing. And 2 years prior to that, I was coaching high school basketball, and that's when I knew that God has blessed me.
I mean, that's unbelievable. So before we go to when you left there, what were the biggest changes to you? I know you kind of became
Well,
guru of the slobs, but
yeah, yeah. I'll, t-
before we
I'll,
get
t-
to that, what kind of became the?
I'll tell you what, Corey. I had a challenge
Mm,
because everybody knew probably the reason why I was there. Okay, I was
mm,
there because of Doug Collins. I was his buddy,
mm,
and not many times does a high school coach jump from high school to the pros. It's happened two or three times that I know of.
mm.
And so I knew right away I had to go in there and work my tail off, work my rear end off. And number one, I had to do whatever was asked of me. I mean, I was rebounding for players, I was throwing passes for 3, 4 hours a day, uh, working guys out. Um,
And
and
this was a time when there wasn't as many assistants too.
Oh no, and it was the best time. The NBA was so much better in my mind then than it is now, and
Mm,
coaches today will tell you that. Okay,
mm.
there were three assistants and maybe one guy behind the bench, and now there's 12 assistants. So you don't know who you're listening to. All right, every guy's got his own workout coach. No,
Yeah.
Doug Collins goes, I don't need a shooting coach. I was a pretty good shooter in the day. Okay, he goes, I think I know a little bit about shooting. I think our coaches can work out our players, and so anyway, and then John Hammond, who was later the president of the Bucks and vice president of the Orlando Magic. I mean, he worked out the guards. He worked out the big guys. I worked out the guards, and then he and I did all our scouting. So like I was flying somewhere in the afternoon, watching the game live, flying it back, the first flight out in the morning. I mean, my first year as a Piston coach, I was only home 5 days in the first month in November, and my wife is looking at me cross-eyed, like, "What have you signed up for?" So 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 anyway. But those guys, if you're honest with them, do not lie to NBA players, okay? Because they know they can see right through you. You better tell them the truth and be honest with them and spend time with them in terms of workouts and things like that. And you can gain their respect. The first time you don't know what you're talking about, or if they ever catch you in a blatant non-truth, your history to them. Okay, so I learned that right away. That boy, they want somebody to spend time with them and work with them, whenever they call you. It could be at 10 o'clock at night. It could be at 7 in the morning. You got to be available, and if you do that, you and he and that player can form quite a bond.
Hey, you also mentioned this story to me 30 years ago when you opened up your home and you were just starting with the Pistons and invited me over. And I said, so how do you get the NBA players to know that what you know? And I don't know if you remember, but you told the story about drawing up one of your scout plays in the timeout saying, this
This
is
is
what
what
they're
they're
going to
going to do.
run now. This is how we're going to stop it. Can you go back to that story?
Yeah, well, when you watch a team, um, at that day, depending on your head coach, there's 30 teams in the NBA, let's say, and each assistant, the three assistants will have 10 teams. Okay, so you lock in on those 10 opponents, and then what I did is our video coordinator, some of those young kids who want to be aspiring coaches, some of the famous coaches in the NBA today started out as video coordinators. And I
Mm,
said, I want to watch every game that they play that's decided by 5 points or less, I want the last 8 minutes of that game because that's when they run their best stuff. And so you get a book on each team, either on paper. Back then, it was you draw those plays out, right, Corey? Okay,
Yeah.
instead of fast draw or you got a video or on the computer. I mean, everything was done by hand.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I got very quickly um, a reputation of knowing what the opponents did. And when I was a high school coach, this goes back to my high school days, I wanted our players on our high school teams to know each high school's plays as good as they did, if not better. So that
Mm.
kind of carried over. I said I set a goal to myself. I'm going to know every one of the Utah Jazz plays. As soon as Jerry Sloan calls something, I'm going to let our guys know. So it just so happened, Dan, that I was very fortunate at that time that one of the teams ran the exact play that I drew up in the huddle, what they were going to do. We stopped it, we win the game. And, then back in the locker room, guys can either, chest bump you. And when your head coach credits you in front of the team in the locker room, it's a thrill. Corey will know that.
Yeah, you got a lot of work that you had to put into that to make that happen. It wasn't a random thing either.
Yeah.
And I would think pros probably recognize it, whereas sometimes a high school kid, even a college kid, may take it for granted just because they don't, maybe know the whole inner workings. Whereas a pro guy knows that was you.
Yeah.
We did
Well,
it, but you got us in the spot.
I
Thanks, man.
appreciate that. Another one of my former players at Glenbrook North is Billy Donlin, who's now the associate head coach at Clemson, and has been a head coach twice in college, and Billy
Set
and
in this gym one time right here. He recruited a
oh
guy
yeah,
when he
oh
was
yeah,
at Wright State.
yeah, he's quite the basketball coach and quite the
Mm.
character. And he said our high school teams were the most prepared. It really prepared him for college because we were so prepared. And I wasn't a great player, but so I had to find an edge, an advantage of some other way to counterbalance that. Eventually, they're going to make a change in your department, and so you look around and say, "Oh, who's in my department? I guess I'm the only one, right?" So Doug Collins leaves. Alvin Gentry takes over as the head coach in Detroit. He wanted to keep our staff together, but the ownership, because Doug left on not friendly terms,
Mm.
they said, "No, you're going to get all of Doug's guys out of there." Now, the sign of respect is that happened twice with different coaches and I, where it did not end on good terms, but twice later, like within 2 years, they tried to hire me back. Okay.
Oh. Mm.
So I leave. I didn't know what I was going to do, Corey. It
Mm.
was the first time I'd ever been fired. Um, I thought, oh, I'm going to have to go back to Illinois and be a high school coach again. I was so blessed that within 10 days, I developed a friendship with all the other assistant coaches throughout the league. That's another thing that young coaches need to do. They need to get to know the other coaches on other teams.
Mm.
You never know what's going to happen in the future. In 10 days, I developed a friendship with Butch Carter, the former Indiana player and former NBA player. I developed a friendship with him. He gets named the head coach of the Toronto Raptors,
Mm.
and he calls me up and he says, "I want you to be on my staff." And he says, "I know you're married with a family, but you work like you're single, okay?" And he goes, "Because you don't look at the clock." And he goes, "I need you on my staff." So I fortunately had a job, 3 days on the job. We traded Marcus Camby for Charles Oakley. So we got a real true veteran who wants to win from the Knicks. And then I did all of our draft workouts. And within 3 weeks, we worked out a guy who I was throwing lobs to. He was catching the ball at the top of the square and dunking him, and then apologize for not jumping so high because he was in Denver the night before. And his name was Vince Carter. And so my first ever draft in Toronto, we drafted a guy by the name of Vince Carter, and I inherited Tracy McGrady. And you talk about a high wire electric couple of 2, 3 years in Toronto for me. I mean, Michael Jordan is the best player I ever coached, but I never had Michael in his prime. the best two players I ever coached were Grant Hill because I had him in his prime, and Vince Carter because I had him in his prime. If you look back, his first 3 years as an NBA player, we had all of Canada watching every one of our games. That's why he was always, like first team All Star.
Mm.
Everybody voted for Vince, and then those slam dunk championship that he and Tracy had, back when the slam dunk championship meant something. Um, it was an unbelievable time. Vince could win games for you at the end of the game, and it was just a phenomenon. New arena in Toronto, basketball first time ever at a high level there in Toronto, and it was like playing in the Olympics because it was such an international city. It was something that I'll never forget.
You got a Vince Carter and a Tracy McGrady and the dunking and the scoring.
Well,
What goes on behind the scenes? How
I'll
hard
tell
are
you
they
one story
working?
about those
What's
two
the
guys.
level of
I'll tell you,
skill?
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you two stories. Okay, number one, we were struggling, as all teams do when you play 82 regular season games, 8 preseason games, and then the playoffs. There comes a time in the season where the guys are a little bit tired, and you lose a couple of tough games. And we have this we call a meeting in the locker room, and Vince, and you don't want to cross Charles Oakley. And we had a lot of great veterans. We had Dale Curry, we had Kevin Willis, we had Muggsy Bogues. I mean, we had a who's who on those during those 3 years. And Charles Oakley said, "Look, you two young kids," meaning McGrady, and stared him down, McGrady and Carter. He says, "We're good enough. We're good enough. These old guys are good enough to keep them at bay for 3 quarters. But you two better step up and win the game for us when the game counts in the fourth quarter." That
Hmm.
changed our team. That changed our team. Vince was working out, and Tracy were working out. Tracy was growing up, becoming more mature because when he was drafted by the Raptors, Isaiah Thomas drafted Tracy before I got there. But he had never been to the grocery store before, and really didn't know how to write a check or anything like that. When you draft a 18-year-old kid, you don't know what you're getting. Right? So 18, 19-year-old kid, but Tracy was really coming into his own. And I remember walking over. Tracy was going to be a free agent. Toronto had already offered him the max, and he was getting his ankles taped in our practice gym. And I walked over to him and I said, "Tracy, I want to tell you something that's coming from my heart." I said, "If you resign with us and you and Vince are locked up full for a great number of years together," I said, "I could sit over there in that chair and twiddle my thumbs for the next 10 years, and we're going to be in the final four of the East every single year with you two playing together." And after he left and went to Orlando, I saw him about a year later, and he came up and he gave me a big hug. He goes, "You know what? You were right. Maybe I should have done that." Now his career,
Mhm.
obviously was great in Orlando and Houston. So, he's a Hall of Famer. But I'll never forget that, going up to him and saying that to that day. It would have made my job a lot easier.
Right.
Well,
That
you had so many veterans. You kind of touched on it right there. That was what I was about to say on
Well,
that
you,
team.
you, you talk about Steph Curry knocking shots down.
Mhm.
I mean, he was starting high school basketball in Toronto as an eighth grader, seventh and eighth grader, because you could. But his dad, Del Curry, was as good a shooter as I've ever seen. And
Yeah.
and he played when the game was on the line. We had to limit his minutes, but when the game was on the line, Del Curry was on the floor. And if you remember, that's the game we won the first round series. We beat New York in game 5 in New York to win the first round. And then we had to play the Sixers, and we lost in game 7 in Philadelphia. And that's when Vince would score 50, then Allen Iverson would score 50, and Vince would come back with 50, and so forth. And we lost on Vince Carter's shot at the buzzer in game 7 when Vince went to the graduation at North Carolina early in the morning. And, um, to this day, he was in the locker room 2 to 3 hours before tip off. So he says it didn't affect him, and I agree with Vince, but that was the controversy on that day.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that. So you end up leaving there. So now your next stop,
Well,
it
well,
gets
I
a
would have
little
stayed.
crazier now. Gets a
I
little
would, I
crazier
would, I
now.
would have stayed in Toronto for a long time. Butch Carter
Mhm.
was no longer the coach. Lenny Wilkins, the He's got more wins than any other NBA coach in the history of the league. Became our coach. I had a great year with Lenny. Loved him. To this day, still alive, still doing well in Seattle. Talked to him a couple months ago. Still doing great. And
Everybody loves him. Yeah, great years in Atlanta here.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yes, sir. And in fact, he was the coach when they beat us in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
So I coached with Lenny, and I get a call from Doug Collins early April. I mean, the regular season still has about 2 weeks left, and he says to me, he says, "Are you sitting down?" So I knew that was trouble. Okay. He goes, "I just got a call from Michael Jordan." And he goes, I'm going to be the coach of the Washington Wizards, okay, next year. So, BJ, you're coming with me. He didn't ask me for it. He told me, he says, and you're coming with me, okay. And and then he goes, Michael's going to be the president. He hasn't promised me yet he's going to play, but he tells me he's back working out every single day. And he goes, he may or may not play. That's all I'm going to tell you. All right. So Michael Jordan, then I saw Doug. I went to Washington. It was an off day for us. I flew there for the press conference. And MJ sees me in the hallway and says to me, he goes, he called me Jamesy. I know no one ever calls me Jamesy, but he called me James. He says, Jamesy, I want Doug to be my coach, and I don't know the reason why, but he sure in hell wants you. So he goes, I guess you're coming with us too. All right. And then uh, he, he takes the job. He's working out every day. I take the job, and I don't have my contract signed yet. So, and we're haggling over. I mean, the dollar amount was not the problem. Okay. Uh, and Michael said to me two things. They were not going to pay for my cell phone. Everybody pays for your cell phone, okay, or they give you a stipend, right? So it was just little stuff like $100 a month for cell phone bill. All right. So he calls me up on my way home one day, and my agent is on the third line, so it's a three-way call, and he goes, John Langle is my agent. He goes, John, is BJ on the line? Um, and I said, Michael, I'm here. He goes, BJ, are you taking this friggin' job? He didn't say friggin'. Okay. He said, BJ, are you taking this friggin'
Edited for
job or
podcast.
not? Okay. And he caught me off guard. And I said, yeah, I'm taking it. And he goes, all right, let me tell you something, BJ. He says, again, he goes, I want Doug, and for whatever reason, he wants you. All right. But he goes, now I'm giving you a contract that 3 years are guaranteed. And the fourth year is guaranteed if we make the playoffs in any of the first 3 years. I said, I see that. I see that. And he goes, do you think I'm a good player, BJ? Now this is Michael Jordan asking me. He says, do you think I'm a good player? Do you think I could still play, BJ? I said, Michael, I think you're the best player ever. So he says, I'm working my ass off to get in shape. And I'm going to get back to the way I was. And he says, do you think we're going to make the playoffs if I play? And I said, Michael, we're going to make the playoffs. So you could sit over there on your ass and us make the playoffs, and I get you another year on your contract. Okay. So anyway, I said, Michael, I'm signing the contract. All right. That was it. So it only lasted 2 years together because Michael then after 2 years was going to inherit the entire franchise and was going to bring a lot of his own people in, which which is his right. He's the president. And so after he retired as a player, even though um, um, they were losing $30 million a year before Michael took over. We made 15 million each year that he played. It was like coaching Elvis Presley. All people wanted to look at him, touch him. We sold out every game, guys, home and road, including the preseason. So 90 games a year 90 games a year were sellouts. And the first year we had we were 26-21 at the All-Star break. Charles Barkley and the crew on TNT was picking us to win the East, and everybody got hurt. Everybody got hurt. Michael missed 6 weeks. Rip Hamilton missed 6 weeks. Um, so anyway, now the second year, Michael played all 82, but everybody else got hurt, and we traded Rip Hamilton for Jerry Stackhouse, and Rip later became a Hall of Fame player with Detroit. And but anyway, so we missed the playoffs barely both years because of injuries. And then they let Michael go, and then Doug didn't want to coach the team anymore. So
Right.
so that we had a change there. And so I broadcasted for 2 years. Sage Steele was my broadcast partner. But it was a trip. The Washington Wizard experience, I wouldn't trade it for anything. We had Leitner, we had Oakley again, we had a Hubert Davis, who's the Carolina coach now. It was just an amazing time to play in front of those crowds.
Those are great stories there. And BJ, one of our favorites on the Off the Beaten Path podcast is name dropping and go with Michael Jordan and all down the line.
Well, he still at age 39 could get you 50 in a game, and he just couldn't jump as high. And back-to-back games. That first night, he was gonna put on a show like no other. The second night, he was only gonna get you about 20. Okay, so I mean, like there were times where Kenyon Martin was guarding him and said, "Hey, Michael, take it easy on me one time. Take it easy on me tonight. My back hurts." At the next time out, Michael says, "Throw it to me every single time on the block." He says, "I'm going to wear this guy out, and don't take me out until I tell you to." And he gets 45 plus, and then another great player, Hall of Fame player, asking for his phone number. So he comes to he goes, "I'm going to kill this guy tonight." He wants to be my friend. So just so many stories like that.
Compete and win. So a Michael Jordan, a Tracy McGrady, a Vince Carter, all these big names that we've listed off. What is a name that most people don't know in the NBA that you coached? One of the other coaches, one of the players that left a mark on you, or you had a moment with that's kind of a insight.
One of the best coaches in the NBA right now is T. Lue. All right, Tyronn Lue, and with the Clippers, and we had T. Lue as our backup point guard in Washington. When he would not drink water, and all he would do is drink Gatorade and Slim Jims. That's all he would eat. And now he's regarded as one of the best players ever in the history of the game. I mean, best coaches. So he's got championships and pedigree and so forth. But I coached a guy named Brian Cardinal, who 3 different times he was known as the janitor in Golden State. They gave him a nice contract in Golden State because he looked like the janitor when he walked in the gym. And so the people just started calling him the janitor, and he played a number of years. But just guys like that, under the radar guys. Michael Curry, who I've already mentioned in this podcast. I not only coached Michael Curry, but I coached with Michael Curry. And the guy, I've never seen a guy captivate a locker room so fast from not being even on any NBA roster because he played so hard. He knew what he was doing. He was a coach's ally. He'd pop his head in the coach's meeting and say, "What do you need to get done today?" You know what I mean? And so, guys like that, Aaron McKee, who I not only coached in Detroit, but coached with in Philly, guys like that, and I'm friends with to this day, are just fantastic.
So you end up announcing and then bouncing back.
Yeah.
So you got 2 more stops here in the NBA.
Well, and I was going to, again, Corey, I was going to take a high school job in Illinois. I had 2 years. I hadn't even had an interview, okay, for 2 years. So I was scouting for the Seattle Sonics when they were good. Ray Allen's team out there. Nate McMillan was the coach. And I was doing my ESPN work, ESPN.com work, writing articles. I was broadcasting the pregame, postgame for the Wizards. I had about 4 part-time jobs, but nothing with that would put you on a pension or anything like that. So I said, I got to get, I've got 18 years as a high school coach. My wife at the time was from Illinois. I said, maybe we should go back to Illinois and I'll just finish this out. So anyway, I go back and I actually do take a high school job and coached a summer league for them and in Hinsdale, Illinois. Hinsdale South was, or Hinsdale Central was the coach, the school, and was prepared to be their coach. And then what happened was, is they kept asking me during the interview process, what happens if you are going to get offered an NBA job? Are you going to go back? I said, I haven't had an interview in 2 years. That's not going to happen. So I didn't answer the question correctly. Right? Well, it just so happened, Corey, that I got 3 job offers by 3 different teams in 3 consecutive days. And
That's unbelievable.
so I went in and put the contract in front of our athletic director and I said, just tell me something. What would you do? What would you do? And he goes, I would take the job. So
He said, "See you later."
I ended up buying their varsity team all brand new uniforms.
Oh, that's awesome.
And but I ended I wish I'd not done that to that school, but it worked out okay. And so I went back to the Milwaukee Bucks, and we had a very, very good team. We had Michael Redd there at the time.
Mhm.
We had Tony Kukoc, another Hall of Famer who
Yeah.
I got to coach.
Joe
Great,
Smith,
yeah, oh yeah, and
Bogut. I'm seeing some of these
oh yeah,
TJ
Andrew
Ford. Man,
Bogut,
you had some good
we
good
picked
players.
number 1 in the draft.
Mhm.
We made the playoffs only one time in the 3 years that I was there. I coached with Terry Stotts, who is now working with Steve Kerr out in
Mhm.
Golden State. Terry Stotts is one of the best and creative offensive minds that I have ever worked with.
Mhm.
I worked with Larry Kostoviak, who had a long run as not only as an NBA player, but also as an NBA coach and also the head coach at the University of Utah. Uh,
Mhm.
and so, anyway, it was a great, great run. Coach TJ Ford, Coach Mo Williams, good guys. And wish we were a little more talented and could have gone deeper in the playoffs. But
Mhm.
that's when the Pistons were at their best,
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so it was good. It was good. It lasted 3 years, and my kids went to high school there in Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin, and it was a great place to raise a family. And I wouldn't have traded my Bucks. To this day, I have many, many friends in the Milwaukee area due to
Mhm.
my tenure with the Bucks.
So then you end up leaving there, and you
Well,
go again where we're
no,
at the familiar face.
I thought I was going to go to Chicago at one time because
Mhm.
they were flirting with Doug to come back and coach the Bulls again, and
Mhm.
that fell apart a couple different times. And I thought I might go to Stanford with Johnny Dawkins and be his associate head coach, and but that didn't quite work out because I was waiting for the Bulls situation. But what happened was then Doug Collins got the itch again, and
Mhm.
he called me up one day and said, "Get ready to do this one more time." And the Bucks job lasted 3 years, and then again when they let you go, I was doing all kinds of different jobs. I had 2 full-time jobs. One was I was a full-time instructor at Cardinal Stritch University. I mean, I was teaching a full workload. It was 2 miles from my house. I taught there, and then I scouted for 8 different teams in the NBA. I was going to every home game of the Bucks or the Bulls, and I would take the train to Chicago. So I was working both those jobs, evaluating officials for the NBA, um, and also coaching my son. His best job I ever had was coaching my son's 6th and 7th grade community team. Which I just loved for free.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, Doug calls me up and says, we're going to do this one more time. The Philadelphia 76er franchise and he have a special relationship at that time.
Mhm.
And when they were drafted, Doug number 1 in the draft, and he played 8 years there, All-Star 5 times. Went to the NBA Finals. And so anyway, they named him the head coach. and we had such a great group of guys. We had Drew Holiday at age 19, made him an NBA All-Star for the first time. We had Andre Iguodala, who was our best player. We had Elton Brand, who was a great veteran, a great pro. We had six men of the year, Lou Williams and Thad Young coming, and they were incredible players. We drafted Evan Turner, who had a really good run at Ohio State, Player of the Year, and also with us in the 76ers in Portland, among others. And we just had a really, really good team. And Spencer Hawes, and we beat the Bulls when they were the number one team in the playoffs. Number one seed, we were number eight. And again, it was a turnaround. Not only did Doug turn around the Pistons, he turned around the Wizards and he turned around the Sixers.
What you said that earlier, BJ. Why? What's the magic touch there?
Culture, playing serious, playing the right way. Doug believed in no turnovers.
Hmm.
We were going to turn that ball over 10 times or less. Value the ball. Obviously, he was a master. Doug Collins was a master at, oh, you're gonna defend our plays this way. Well, then this is how we're gonna counter it, and or you're gonna make this substitution. We're gonna play this guy. So, and he knew who to pick on late in the game, and just Doug was a uh, a master at teaching basketball and knowing what to do at what time. And that's why Doug's regarded as one of the best coaches in NBA
Hmm.
history. I mean, he's in the Hall of Fame now as a contributor, but it was a collection of playing, broadcasting, and coaching. And he could have been in the Hall of Fame at all three had he
Mhm.
coached enough years. So anyway, we turned the franchise around. That is, if you remember, the first time ever that Derrick Rose tore his knee up, and it happened right in front of me in Game One. Um, when the game, that we had a 16-point deficit in the last 2 minutes, so we took three starters out, and Derrick Rose was still on the floor. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not coaching their team, and I don't know. I don't didn't pretend to, but they had some of their guys still out there, and then he tore his knee up with about a minute 20 to go in the game, and
Mhm.
we ended up winning the series, and then lost in Game 7 in the second round to Boston, and we take Boston all the way when the big three, Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce. Paul Pierce fouls out in Game 7, Corey, and we have with 5 minutes to go, we have a 3-point lead, I believe.
Wow.
And I'm pinching myself, and I said, we're going to the Eastern Conference Finals and playing Miami. Okay. And I thought, holy cow, we're the number 8 seed and we're going to be in the finals, and I'm concentrating on winning the game, and that's when Ray John Rondo completely dominated the last 5 minutes and took over, and the Celtics won and took that to them. But great run in Philly. It ended up being one of the worst trades, though, to kind of end our tenure, is when we basically traded four players and a draft pick for Andrew Bynum, who never played 1 second for us. He was the NBA second team center for the Lakers. Was going to be a free agent, or had a 1 year left, and then a free agent. And we traded, basically Andre Iguodala and Nick Vujicic, and a couple other moves in there but we traded the whole farm for Andrew Bynum, and then, basically that's when the trust the process began 1 year early, and
Mhm.
so Doug and I stayed one more year, and we didn't do quite as well, and then he decided that. He was going to go back and retire and go back to the announcing, which was a good move for him.
Mhm.
And where did that put you?
Well,
Take us to your next step.
put me on the free agent list, but then Chris Collins kind of circles back. He was always coming around. He says, I'm always wanting to coach with you. Whenever I take my first head job, I want you to help me be my right arm, and get me off to a great start and teach me how to coach in games and things like that. And I said, well, I would love to, hoping that it was going to be at Duke. Uh, but he calls me up and says, "Look, I'm in the final two or three, and I think I'm gonna get the job, but I'm gonna be the next coach at Northwestern. Let's move back home and let's try to do this where I think we can make a winner out of Northwestern." Now, Corey, it had never been done before, and it's the hardest thing we've ever had to do. Northwestern had never been to the tournament in 78 years. And you're talking about the Big Ten now. I mean, you're talking about the teams in the Big Ten, are so good. Purdue is the number one rated team right now in college basketball preseason. So, you know, we start that. Our facilities are bad. Uh, probably the worst gym I've ever coached in. And now you're trying to tell high school kids, come here, get your brains beat in, but we're going to turn this around. Their old rah rah speech. So it's hard to get guys to believe in you when you haven't done it before. And sure enough, our first ever conference game was a home game against Wisconsin with Bo Ryan, and they had a Final Four team. Okay, and the at halftime we were down 40-14 in our first ever game, and I'm leaving the Sixers. Chris has just left Duke, and we're looking at each other, and at the same time we say, "What have we gotten ourselves into here?" 1 month later, we go to Wisconsin and beat them by 13, and
In
and
Madison.
almost,
and
Mhm.
that
almost as many points as you scored in the first
Yeah,
half.
exactly. And that kind of started, we ended the year winning three of our last five in the league and things like that. So, that kind of started the trajectory. We had three or four players that really believed in Chris in terms of recruiting wise. We got two local kids, Scott Lindsay, Vic Law from Chicago, that they never hardly recruited great players from Chicago. And
Mhm.
then we got Bryant McIntosh, who's now a coach on our staff, a great point guard out of Indiana. And sure enough, BMAC and that group, Derek Pardon, we got a center that was a mid-major prospect. We got him out of Ohio. And those guys led us to the tournament and for the first time. And we got Julia Louise Dreyfus coming to all the games because her son's on the team as a walk-on, and like we get a movie written about us because it was quite a thing, and we've gone three times now in the 9 years, last 9 years.
I would say this as just a fan growing up in ACC country, where I would get to skip school on Thursday to watch the beginning of the ACC tournament.
Best.
Me and my dad watching together, and at that point I'm already coaching, and we don't really watch a lot of games together anymore. And seeing Doug Collins in the crowd crying when y'all won,
Oh,
and just I mean,
it was
unbelievable, man.
it
Like
was
that was I remember that like I was part of it. I mean, that
Yeah,
was
it was
unreal.
incredible. I mean, we played Vanderbilt in the first round, and that's, we won by 1 point, and they had the last shot of the game, so we had to get a stop, and we had to score, two free throws to give us the 1 point lead with about 15 seconds to go. So, it was just
Couldn't be easy,
story,
right? Couldn't be easy.
storybook. It was a storybook, and let me tell you something. Gonzaga was in. We had to then play Gonzaga, which was the number 2 seed in the entire tournament.
Mhm.
But we played in Salt Lake City. It holds 20,000 people, and when we played Gonzaga, there were 15,000 people because all the other two teams were still representing.
Right.
We had 15,000 people rooting for us, and we took Gonzaga right down to the wire before we lost.
Yeah, just a couple
But
plays and free throws there. That was
Oh, yeah.
close.
But this has led Corey to what we're doing now, and it's such an amazing place to be at. Northwestern, as Dan knows, top number 9 right now in academic in the world schools, right on Lake Michigan. We got brand new facilities. Our former AD is now the commissioner of the ACC, Jim Phillips, and he did a great job of fundraising for those facilities. And every game now is a sellout in our at home. So Dan, you need to let me know when you want to come. I got to
Hey,
snag some tickets for you. But anyway, it's just an amazing place. What Chris Collins and our university has given us now. And our freshman class is the best freshman class we've ever had in terms of recruiting, because a lot of schools are not recruiting freshmen anymore. So um, we were very blessed to get possibly one of the best players to come out of Indiana. Got Mr. Basketball out of Pennsylvania.
Wow.
We got a kid who played in Columbus, Ohio, who led the FIBA games, U19. He played for Argentina, led the entire tournament in scoring. Those are three of our five freshmen. So we have the number one scorer in the Big Ten coming back, Nick Martinelli, who Dick Vitale says is an All-American. Things are looking up in Evanston, Illinois. And even though we're picked 10th to 13th this year, preseason, we got second 3 years ago, third 2 years ago, had a winning record last year, would have made the tournament again. We had two serious injuries, one to Brooks Barnheiser, one to Jalen Leach, who missed the last 10 plus games of the season. But we still had a winning record. And Brooks, our first ever draft pick, number 44 out of OKC. So things are good right now at Northwestern and Evanston for basketball.
How about that? They sure are. But before those three NCAA tournament trips, you talked about bringing in Ryan McIntosh and Pardon. How did you convince them to come to the bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten?
Well, I remember recruiting Derek Pardon myself. Armand Gates and I recruited him, tag teamed him, and I remember going up to Derek on an open gym and said, if you, I told his parents at that open gym, they stopped me in the parking lot going out, and I said, if you believe in me and our school, we will recruit your son really hard, and we'll make him a really great player, and get him a degree. And I stood true to my word, and I worked with him every single day. He became a great player. We haven't even talked about the best player in the history of our school that we've had there is Boo Buie. I saw him play in Seal Beach, California on the Mass Rivals AAU Adidas circuit. Emmanuel Dildy, who's now at Duke as the associate head coach, did an unbelievable job recruiting him. We had Taylor Battle on our staff, who, fortunately for us, was Boo Buie's half brother. So it's all about connections, right, Corey? So Taylor is an incredible coach. He's at Penn State now, and we've had some really good players. McIntosh wanted to go to Duke. Bryant McIntosh loved Duke like Corey does. Okay, all right. So anyway, no, no. So anyway, McIntosh's favorite team is Duke. So if you're not good enough to go to Duke, when Chris Collins found that out, he was on him like a wet wash rag, right? Okay. So he goes, do the next best thing. Play for a great guard from Duke who coached at Duke and won national championships at Duke. And McIntosh believed in him. And not only did he have a great career, but he's on our staff now. And he's the reason I don't have to recruit on the road anymore, Corey. McIntosh.
I'm going to ask you about that. Recruiting on the road at the college level versus recruiting NBA free agents. Which one do you take?
No, you take the NBA every single time. And here's the reason why. I've recruited kids for 2 years, great players at Northwestern. And at the 11th hour, they call you up and say, we're going to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
That's why so many people now just recruit the transfer portal, because the transfer portal is 2 to 3 weeks long. They come visit you. You talk about playing time. You may or may not now, unfortunately, that you talk about financial terms, NIL opportunities. But yeah, and sometimes their parents may not even, you're 22, 23. Why would we come on this recruiting trip? Make your mind up. It might last 2 weeks. So, and in the pros, the difference in the pros, all Americans are begging you to pick them in the draft. They're begging you. Say, if you pick me, you will never regret it. So that's the difference. In college, you're convincing the player to come, and in the pros, they're convincing you to pick them. So that's the difference.
How about that? Hey, basketball dad question. You said you loved the sixth, seventh grade rec team that you coached. We talked
Yes.
about Doug Collins being a pretty good basketball dad when Chris was playing at Glenbrook North, just up the road from Northwestern. What's Doug Collins like as a basketball coach's dad? Corey referenced the crying and the
Well,
emotion, but how, because
well,
TV cuts to him and you see him.
I'm going to tell you a couple quick stories. This goes back to when Doug was the Bulls coach. No, it was right when he got fired from the Bulls, and he was the number one broadcaster for TNT. Okay, and he was coming to all our games, and then he was uh, at home. That's where Chris learned a lot about basketball. He and his dad would sit and watch games on TV together and talk about 2-for-1 situations. This is why you do this. They haven't thrown the ball inside in 3 straight possessions. Maybe we need to get the ball inside, or look for them to take a timeout here. And Chris learned the game from his dad. But then when he started trying to talk to him about fundamentals and coaching him directly, CC said, "Stop, coach. Stop, Dad. I've got a pretty damn good coach who's teaching me how to play on the court. I want you to be my dad." And you know what? Doug Collins never forgot that.
Mm.
So they don't talk a lot about the X's and O's about basketball anymore. Now, Doug and I might talk, okay? Corey knows. Doug and I might talk, and I try to send a message through a third party. But he does not. He wants. They got a really good relationship right now as father and son, and they want to keep it that way. So he doesn't go down that path too much. He'll come. He lives in two. He doesn't live in Chicago anymore. He's where his other grandsons are playing and granddaughter are playing sports in Westchester, PA, and then he has a home in Arizona. But he'll come to about 6, 7 games a year,
Hmm.
3 times, and then but obviously he's got that TV glued, okay, to his eyes.
All right. Well, now we get to the fun part. We'll go lightning round. Me and
All
Sarah
right.
will ask about 3 or 4 questions apiece, and then we'll have the shot clock on, but we can always extend it, get offensive rebound, and make it
Oh
go a little
boy.
longer if we
Oh
need to.
boy.
But I'll start us off. It seems like to me you've mentored a lot of guys who've gotten into coaching. Maybe it wasn't intentional at the time when they were playing for you or whatever, but and some of them have come back and even coached with you after you coached them.
Yeah.
And then of course you kind of mentored Chris there, even though you've been together so long now. Kind of walk us through like how does coaching a coach? How is that different from coaching a player?
Well, I love it when my former players are now coaching, and then they might call you up and say, "I got to run a scenario by you. Okay, how would you handle this?" We have
Yeah.
one of our former backup point guards, Ryan Greer, who's now one of the top assistants for the OKC G League team, and will
Oh,
soon
awesome.
will soon be higher than that. And
Mhm.
but I love it when Billy Donlin or another former player of mine will attribute something to me, or we all have egos, or we all like to be told nice things once in a while, or they'll call you up to say, I haven't talked to you in a couple of months. I'd love to, be able to call you up and ask you questions periodically, and I love it. I love it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. My dad wasn't a coach, so I use that a lot when I call a guy I played for, I call the guy I worked with, and
Yeah,
kinda bounce
yeah.
ideas even nowadays. And that's awesome. That's awesome. All right, so let's get a little off of hoops. I'm a big food guy, so you've been in a lot of cities, man. Give me the best foodie town
Well,
you've
I
been
used
in.
to, I used to think that Chicago is right downtown Chicago.
Uh,
NBA coaches are very fickle. They want to go to the same restaurant in every city. In some cities, you only go to one time. Like the East only goes west once.
yeah.
To each city, you only play them 2 times, home and road, home. So, and like we used to go to the Metropolitan Grill in Seattle. When you go to Chicago, you go to Gibson's.
Mm.
You go to Boston, it's Chow Bella. You go to it's Prime 112 in Miami. It's
Yeah.
so I'm a stickler for. I love pasta and I love a good steak. And there's really nothing I don't like except real spicy food. But
Uh,
wherever Doug, I'll tell you where it's going. You're going to go to eat dinner. It's going to go wherever Doug Collins or wherever your head coach is. Wherever they want to go, that's where you're going. Hopefully, because they're going to pick up the bill. Okay.
I got you. All right. So now you've been doing this a pretty good while. You got a name. Like we talked about earlier, you're kind of the king of the slobs, some say, the sideline out of bounces. But when's the first time of you kind of making it NBA coach, won a bunch of high school, y'all win a tournament game at Northwestern, first time ever. When was the first time somebody kind of humbled you after one of those scenarios
Oh
where
my
they didn't
God,
know
Doug
who you
Collins!
were or whatever?
Doug Collins didn't speak to me for 2 days one time. I mean, we're playing. We, uh, we're playing the Clippers on national TV. It's a TNT game,
Mhm.
and we are down one. We are down one with 6 seconds to go. Okay, and um, it might even be, I want to stand corrected. It was 3 seconds to go. So now I was always in charge of 3 point field goal tries from sideline out of bounds. That was my specialty in Philly, not just a 2 point field goal, a quick hitter
Yeah.
at this date. So anyway, we call a 20-second timeout, and Doug Collins hands me the board. Okay, hands me the board. He says, draw us up a game winner. And like I'm dumbfounded because he's never asked me to do that for a 2 point field goal or to win a
Yeah.
game. It's always been a three. So after 10 seconds of the 20 seconds, then he says, I don't like that play, BJ. I don't like that play. Now we're on national TV. I got 10 seconds to go to win the game. And the players are staring at me. Okay. And so all I did was draw the zipper to ISO, right?
Yeah.
Basically. Okay. And Kenyon Martin is defending the ball. They have a guy named Reggie Evans, who is regarded as one of the best defensive players in the NBA at that time.
Mhm.
And then they had another electric defensive point guard. So basically, I get the ball to Lou Williams,
Mhm.
and he's basically being triple teamed at the 3 point line. And he throws one up, and it doesn't even hit the rim. I almost was so distraught that I did not go back in the locker room. I mean, I throw my clipboard. Doug is all upset. BJ, you lost us the game, this and that, like. So anyway, Rod Thornton comes to my defense and says, BJ, you've done a great job with this. They're not all going to work. And so anyway, now I ride with Doug to the airport. We're leaving right then after the game to go to an away game. We got to go to the airport, and he's calling his son Chris. I said, BJ froze tonight. BJ froze. I don't know why. So anyway, he didn't speak to me for 2 days. So, love the guy, but boy, that was a bad night for me. That was a bad, bad night.
That's good. That's good stuff right there. All right, sir. I'll hand the baton to you.
All right.
The best night, Corey, though, I'll tell you one real quick, was March
Uh,
1st, 2017, when
mm,
we got to go full court, 1.7 seconds to go against Michigan to make the tournament. And a couple of us, me included, thought, okay, let's just get the ball in bounds. We'll go to overtime and in front of our home crowd. And another guy, assistant coach, say, no, let's go for it. And Chris said, let's go for it. Just make sure we catch the ball and so forth. So we drew up a play, 1.7 seconds against John Beeline, and sure enough, they had 4 NBA players on the floor, and we had our little team with BMAC and Pardon and so forth, and we drew up a full court play that Derek Pardon does a block to block drill. I make him make 30 of those a day, every day, where you rebound the ball for him. He shoots it off the board from one block, sprints to the next block. You throw the rebound to him very quickly. They got to make them all. And I had Nate Taporn, who was a great outfielder in high school, throw the pass. He threw a perfect pass all the way down to the block after we set a couple screens so that we got a switch. and we won and did our first court storming, and it ended up being the ESPN Player of the Year in college. So
Wow.
Mike Greenberg on the Get Up show was going wild the next day, and Michael Wilbon, another NU grad, they're just going wild. And so anyway, that was on the flip side, that was the best play I've ever drawn up.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That moment is a play of legend for Northwestern basketball, no question, no question, and the pathway to that first NCAA tournament. All right, maybe a little bit faster here. Coach, last book you've read or your favorite book that you'd
My
recommend?
wife handed me "Don't Sweat the Small Stuff." Okay, so that one, and I love the John Gordon books, all of them.
Excellent. How about podcasts? Aside from this one, of course, do you
Well,
listen to
I would
podcasts
say
or are
this
you a
one now.
music guy?
This one now is my all-time favorite. Okay.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah, but a podcast, I like listening to Andre Iguodala's podcast because he was a great player for us, and I like him very much. We're good friends, but also when JJ Redick, who he and Chris Collins are close friends, when he was doing his podcast with LeBron, that was something I locked into. I love the Inside the NBA Sirius XM radio, and they have a podcast now with Brian Scalabrine, and it's just fantastic. It's just
There you
fantastic.
go. All basketball.
Yeah.
How about your music? Are you listening along with the players in the locker
I'm
room?
classic rock all the way. My favorite is Journey, my U2, but anything from the 80s, 90s, 70s. They don't do that. I like country, some country. I'm not big on the rap, but so when I go in the locker room, I don't know one word to those songs. I might know a word, but I don't know the lyrics very well.
You'll dance along, but not sing along.
Yeah.
Okay. Best and worst gyms.
Yeah, the worst was
Course of your career, high school, your own
yeah.
playing
The
days.
worst, the worst gym I ever was our old Northwestern gym back in the day. Now it got loud, but it was high school bleachers all around, and it was not up to Big Ten standards. The best gym now for us, I think environment wise, I'd like to say us. We're right now. Andy Katz said we were um, about fourth or fifth in the Big Ten in terms of environment. But the number one environment in my mind is Mackey Arena in Purdue. I mean, it is electric in there, and it is hard to win when Zach Edey is scoring 35 points a game on you. But we've done so a number of times. We've beaten them twice, both at home. But that right there. Pro. I used to love the Pacer Arena back when they were, putting up. It looked like an old school gym, but it was beautiful. And then I love the Air Canada Center in Toronto. Such a great arena there.
Awesome.
Good
Awesome.
stuff. All right. Thanks, Coach, for sharing a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate you guys, and thanks for having me on. I'll be really anxious to listen to you in the future. And Dan, you're always welcome in our gym. Corey, you too. If you ever need anything, I'd love to entertain you to a game or anything I could do to help you. Don't hesitate to get a hold of me. Okay.
We appreciate that. Any final thoughts from you or shout outs you'd like to
No,
talk?
this is my 49th year of basketball. I turned 70 in November, and I was going to go in. I was thinking about retiring, and Chris Collins immediately said, "Why? You're happy, you're healthy. Why would you quit?" And so I'm a new grandfather. So now people are saying, "Well, you got to go 50." How many people go 50 years in a career? I don't know. I don't know. I'm just going to coach this year and see how it goes, see how I feel. Right now, it's a joy working with 20, 21-year-old kids who love to be in the gym, and they're respectful kids. The academics is important to them. I saw your graduation rate, Corey, when I read a little bit about you, how successful your graduation rate has been at your school. It's when you have motivated kids like that, it's awesome. And so, they keep me young. It's like my own aerobics class, throwing in passes, fielding those short hops, and refereeing now. I'm a ref. So, it's been a great run for me.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we need more coaches, so keep staying in it, man. We
All
love
right, man. Appreciate you.
it. Yes, sir.
Thanks, BJ.
Thank you.
Coach Brian James, thanks so much for sharing your journey from Taylorville, Illinois, downstate through the NBA ranks in Canada and Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady to the Sixers and the Doug Collins connections. So many good stories all along the way. My favorite, taking Northwestern to 3 NCAA tournaments. No question about that. Hey, stay connected with the Off the Beaten Path podcast. Hear more from Brian James and from all our guests. Instagram, Off Beaten Path podcast, and a little Twitter X action there too. Off Beaten Path, little underscore. And that's about it, right, Corey, as we wrap up this episode?
Yeah, definitely. Really enjoyed it. Great show. I know, you had a tie with it, obviously, being your old stomping grounds, but I really learned a lot, enjoyed it. And man, what a coach's coach. I really enjoyed it. So thanks for all of you out there listening to the podcast. And, again, a special thanks to Coach. And, this is a show for those who want to coach, those who used to coach, those who are coaches, those who hire and fire the coaches, and those who enjoy coaching stories. So we're out. See ya.